bit of a silly question, but it's starting off with the idea of equivalent forms of fractions. So if we go back to something you would have done in maybe even middle school already, would you agree that 2 over 3 is equal to 4 over 6?
Yeah.
Right? And that makes sense to you now, but can you see how this would have been really confusing the first time? You're like, those numbers are different. How come that's the same? Right? And you know that with a fraction, whenever you multiply by 1, you could change it. Can you tell me another one that this is equal to?
200 over 300.
200 over 300. What did Callan do to get that?
He multiplied the first two by 100.
He multiplied this one by 100 and this one by 100.
Yeah.
What is 100 divided by 100? What did he multiply by 1? What did he multiply by? 100 over 100 is equal to 1. What happens when you multiply anything by 1? It stays the same. But depending on what your number 1 looks like, right, it changes what your answer looks like. So this question is saying, well, the same thing happens with rational expressions. We want to write two equivalent forms. I'm starting off with x plus 5, x minus 1, and 2, and x minus 1. I'm going to start off with the easiest idea, and that is simplifying. Like in fractions, you learned that if you had 4 over 6, you were taught you really should write it in simplest form. You should write 2 over 3. Can you see anything that could simplify here? Is there anything identical?
Well, we have the x minus 1.
Yeah, that's equal to 1, right? Anytime you have something equal to 1, you could replace it with a 1. So by putting a line through those, I'm basically saying that's equal to 1. So this whole thing is equal to x plus 5 over 2. But maybe we have to remember we still had a non-permissible value. Because the original equation x couldn't equal 1. These would be the same if we still said in the simplified form, we're still remembering that x can't equal 1. But these two are equal to each other. They're the same thing, one's just in simplest form. So that would be considered, I use division to simplify. Would you agree? What number am I feeling like? Maybe 23. I don't think we've had a question with the number 23 in it for quite some time. If I multiply the top by 23 and the bottom by 23, what am I multiplying by? 1. And so I could even multiply this out. 23 times x plus 5 times x minus 1 divided by 23 times 2 would be 46 over x plus x minus 1. That's equivalent. They're the same. Okay? What is our goal going to be probably in this course? Our goal is going to be the simplest form. Because when things are simplified, they're easier to work with. This question is just saying, if you wanted to, you could make a whole bunch of different equivalent ones. The key is you are always allowed to multiply by 1. Never in math are you not allowed to multiply by 1. In fact, in higher level math, realizing what number 1 you should multiply by helps you, right? We've seen some complicated multiplying by 1 already in this course. It's a good time of reviewing where have we used multiplying by 1 in this course. Remember this question? Could you do this one still? If I put this on next test? Question number 1, would you be happy or sad? Yes. Right? In order to simplify this, we're not allowed to have square roots in our denominator. So you would need to multiply by 1. But the one that you needed to multiply was this. The conjugate. And that would make, the reason that is helpful is that means on the bottom I have a difference of squares. And a difference of squares will be this one times this one, which is just 3, minus this one times this one, which is 4. And the top will be distributed square root of 21 plus 2 square roots of 7. So this, in simplest form, would be that answer. That is considered its simplest form because there's no longer a square root on the bottom. What did we have to do? We had to make a fraction in an equivalent form where there was no square roots on the bottom. Okay? Originally, I don't know if you remember, this was done because if you had to figure this out by hand, the answer in the square box might only take you an hour, whereas the original question would take you 3 or 4 hours by hand. Do we still do these by hand for that reason? No. We have our calculator. So sometimes people say, well, why did we learn this multiplying by 1? Well, this idea of multiplying by 1 comes out over and over and over again. And in higher level math, this idea of using a conjugate becomes very important. So seeing it already is sort of getting you ready for AP Calculus in grade 12. But for the most part, we will want to have it simplified as much as possible. That's going to be our goal. But you could, if you wanted to, right? You write an equivalent form. You could write this big, huge number out in front. Just keep going. As long as you write it on the bottom too, it would be right. So usually we don't necessarily want to build them up to too complicated a thing. The simplified is better. Okay. Circle question number 10. I'll let you start that.